8:15. We do have one other speaker that went to our office, so she'll be here shortly, but I want to get you guys out of here by 9, so we're going to get started. My name's Simon Martin. On behalf of Hex Financial Group, we want to thank you guys for coming. Many of you know Hex Financial Group is a fully integrated financial services firm. We have Hex & Associates, the CPA firm, Hex Capital Partners, the investment bank, and Hex Wealth Advisors, the registered investment advisor. Aspire is our gift to you. All that we ask is that if you have an opportunity that you think that we could be helpful, we would love for you to think of us and give us an introduction. We're hiring. I'm sure a lot of you are, so specifically tax and audit. If you have a resume or you know somebody that's looking for a great place to work, we would love the opportunity to meet them. So, a couple of house cleaning things. You have 2 forms as well as your notepad. A CPE form. If you do need CPE, you get an hour credit for today. And a speaker evaluation form. We do appreciate your comments and thoughts. Please fill out the speaker evaluation form. You can turn both of those in as you exit to JC at the desk outside. Today's a special day for us because we have one of our own, Andrea Gardner, who's going to be leading this panel discussion. Andrea is our Director of Operations. She has been with the firm for 7 years, and she's the backbone of what we do. She's the backbone of Aspire, so she runs everything behind the scenes normally, so today she gets to be up front, and I know she's super excited and looking forward to it. So she's going to lead this panel discussion. As I mentioned to some of you coming in, there is one other person who will be here shortly. As soon as she's here, she'll come up. So please join me in welcoming Andrea and our panel of speakers.
Hi everyone, thanks so much for coming today. My name is Andrea Gardner, and like Simon mentioned, typically I'm the behind-the-scenes person who sends out the Aspire invites and plans the event. But today I'm going to be the moderator and host. When we were brainstorming our March Aspire speakers, I noticed that it was on International Women's Day. And so I came to Greg and Simon and I said, hey, why don't we have a female speaker for Aspire for this one? Because when you look at our past Aspire list of speakers, it was predominantly male. And also, if you've been to Aspire before, you know that most of the attendees we have are male. So I thought this would be a great opportunity to try to increase the female presence at our event. And Greg said, yes, that's a great idea. How about we have several speakers and several female speakers and talk about their success in their careers and how they got to be where they are. And I was like, I love it. It's perfect. It's great. Let's do it. And he said, okay, you be the moderator. And I was like, oh, I really signed myself up for something. So the lesson is, if you have a good idea, be prepared to execute on the idea, because it will happen. So, and then when I was tasked with trying to help find speakers, we realized that there is a lack of women in the C-level position or in senior management positions. So it was tricky to try to find speakers, and even that's true in the industries that we interact with. We see a lot more men. So it was tricky, but I'm really excited. We found 3 dynamic women. I'm really excited for us to all learn a little bit more about them together. So I'm going to have them introduce themselves, and then after they're done telling us a little bit about themselves and how they got to be where they are today, I have some questions prepared to ask each of them. Who wants to go first?
Sure. You want me to start? Okay. Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Renda, Mathew. So nice to be here. I am the Dallas Market President for Truist Bank. Been in banking my entire adult career. I started off as a teller at 19 and never left banking, and I'll tell you more about that later. Just a fun fact about me, I survived raising 4 teenage girls successfully. They're now all in their 20s and 2 left to graduate. I know. Thank you very much. I survived. We survived, I should say, my husband and I. But so happy to be here. Love the Hex group, family, and team here, and proud to be here. Thanks.
Yeah. Good morning. My name is Adriana Ocampo, and I work for the Boeing company. I just recently celebrated actually my 26th year anniversary with Boeing. And I'm actually an engineer. I got my bachelor's from the University of Missouri, and I got hired by McDonnell Douglas right out of college in St. Louis, Missouri. And let's see, so today I moved actually here to Dallas in 2018. This is my 7th move with Boeing, and I lead portfolio management and strategy for our global technical operations. So what does that mean, right? In 2017, we opened a new business unit in global services. So it's everything, all the services that we offer after we sell our platforms on the commercial and the defense side of the house. And what my team does is MRO, so anything, modifications, maintenance, repairs for both defense and commercial, domestic and international, and I am the senior manager for portfolio management and strategy. And so how I got to actually meet the HEX team, I love to do a lot of networking events. I am on the national board of the Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers. Love to get inspired, actually love to inspire minorities and females to get into science, technology, engineering, and math. I'm also on the board of High Tech High Heels. So it is an organization that was put together by former females from Texas Instruments. And I'm also part of Success North Dallas. So I see Bill Wallace is back here. So at one of the Success North Dallas events, I got to meet the folks from HEX. And so it was actually through Joe that I got to be invited to participate here today. So glad to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Okay. And then we'll have our third speaker introduce herself when she arrives. But I'm going to start with some questions. So, Renda, I know you've been in commercial banking over 20 years. Who inspired you to be a leader?
I would say that the first person that hired me to be in banking was when I was 19 years old, Dolores Sandel. And she really inspired me to consider banking as a career to begin with. Because I was an English major, I was going to teach kindergarten, that was what I was going to do, and she said, but I think you're really good serving people who need help with their financial, life, like balancing a checkbook at that time, right? And she said, I think you have a really strong gift for communication and relationship building. Commercial banking is just an extension of that, right? So, maybe I was working on the consumer side with individual people, and now I'm working with companies that are anywhere from $10 million to $100 million. And then when it goes higher than that, we work with our middle market team. It's just been a really interesting growth period for me, and I've loved working with that commercial banking space. And she was truly the first person that helped me see some of my talents.
Great. Adriana, you work at Boeing, which is predominantly male. I read that women make up only about a quarter of the workforce there. Is this true to your experience? And tell us a little bit about how that's been for you.
Yeah. So I mentioned that I got hired by McDonnell Douglas when I was right out of college. And I was actually considered a minority when I was hired, but not because I'm Hispanic, right? This was in the 90s, and we were not talking diversity actually here in the U.S. at that time. I was a minority because I was a female engineer in aerospace on the defense side of the house in the Midwest, right? And so there were not many women engineers working manufacturing on the shop floor, right? I was actually supporting the manufacturing and assembly of 2 aircraft in support of our U.S. Navy and the Marines. And so, but my background in engineering was considered very valuable at the time when we were trying to disrupt the production system at the Boeing company. We were looking at the Japanese, who were the experts in this area, and Toyota in particular, right? The automobile industry were actually leading all this lean manufacturing. And so we on the aerospace system, on the aerospace industry, looked at the industrial engineers then to be or to become the subject matter experts in lean manufacturing. And in my case, on the defense side of the house, I was selected to be one of the few to actually got to learn from the Japanese, and that was really awesome. And so I became one of the subject matter experts, and that really led me the opportunity to go and work at different sites. And so I worked in Seattle on the F-22 program, and then I worked on the T-38 down in Mesa, and all the really positive results there led me actually my very first international opportunity in the Czech Republic. So I got to work on a joint venture that Boeing had with a company in the Czech Republic. And when I returned to the US, I got promoted to my very first managerial job before the age of 30. And again, for the most part, I was the youngest on my team and the only female. But growing up, so I grew up in Colombia, South America. I was the only female. I grew up with two brothers. My dad is an engineer. My mom was Colombia's first female marine biologist. So I had that role model at home on my mom. But I think growing up, I took that for granted. It wasn't until I became an adult that now I realize you need to have those kind of role models at home. And if you don't, then at least you need to have that kind of role model either at school or someone in your community, especially being a female. And again, growing up in Colombia, we were not talking minority either, right? But here, now that I work with these nonprofit organizations and all, or either at Boeing, we're doing a lot and we're being very intentional at attracting female and minorities and the work that we do in the communities, attracting females and working with them so that they stay in college, first that they graduate from high school. And when they decide that they need to go to college, that they actually select these careers in STEM. Studies have shown that by the age of 10 to 12, boys and girls, they have the same passion for STEM. But it's about the age, and we all have the same capacity of learning. But it's about the age of 13 that girls actually lose that attraction for STEM. And it's because they don't have the role models. And it's also because the activities that are presented at school are just not around the STEM areas. For the boys there are, but not for the girls. And so how do we maintain the girls actually being attracted to this kind of activities? And it's by presenting the workshops, the activities at the school that keep them motivated to be in STEM. And so that's what we do with girls in tech, with high-tech high heels, and then we just have these kind of activities. And that's why I go to the schools and I want them to see girls like me. And I go, if a girl from Colombia, South America, have made it at the Boeing company, and if I can do it, you can do it, because I'm no different than you. So you can make it, right? And then we can really be role models for them, and then educate the parents too, right? In my case, I was very fortunate because I had educated parents, and so I knew that I didn't have a choice but to go to college, right? So the question was, which school are you going to go to? And even when I said I want to go to the US to go to college, right, I had the ability to do that. So I feel very fortunate and I'm blessed because I had that opportunity. So here is, yes, you need to graduate from high school. And yes, you need to be courageous and then go to college. And yes, there is an opportunity for you to actually enter and work for a company like the Boeing company. What we're doing at Boeing today too is that we have goals for senior managers or for managers in general. And this is actually also tied to the bonuses that we received. So in our succession plans, we need to show what we're doing to attract females and minorities. And we have a goal. 2 years ago, we actually released our very first, we call it GEDI, so it's our Global Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Report, where we're showing everyone, and it's public, what is that we're doing in these areas. So we had to put goals in place, and we had to put plans in place, and we have to tell the world how we're doing. We're doing better, but there's still a lot of work to do. But we started actually with our succession plans, because if we don't have the women and the minority in those leadership positions, then how are we actually motivating our workforce, right? They need to see themselves represented in the leadership team first. So that's how we actually started, and is from the top. Welcome.
Hi.
That's excellent. Okay, well, Kim is here, so
I better have something good to say after all that, I guess.
She does, I swear. So we've done introductions, so do you want to do a little short introduction about yourself and just how you got to the position you're in?
Sure. It's a long story, which I will make like a minute. I studied in East Asian. Oh yeah, my name, I figured they knew that already, but I'm Kim Noltemy. I'm the CEO of the Dallas Symphony, and I have been here for 5 years. Prior to that, I was at the Boston Symphony for 21 years, and I actually studied East Asian studies and lived and worked in Japan, did international business development, and then I went to the arts world. So that's it in a nutshell.
Amazing. I love it. Okay, I wanted to piggyback off of Adriana, the question I asked you. Renda, you're also in a male-dominated field. What is it like being the only female at the table? I know we talked a little bit about this the other day.
Yeah, I think Truist is making the right strides towards making it better. But like Adriana said, I mean, a lot of our corporations have a long way to go, right? I think what's important to know is that when we did the research of our male and female employees, the pay situation was 99% on match, which really gave me a lot of comfort knowing that women above and below what I do day to day are paid fairly and equitably. As far as our North Texas region and how we're building out our teams and how I'm being consciously trying to lift the next person up, whether it's a minority or a woman, what have you. I think we're so entrenched in the work that we do each and every day with DEI and with lifting each other up as far as women. I'm building out a team right now, and I'm very aware of how I'm building out that team. At the table that I sit at every Monday morning, and Tiffany, you know a few of the people at my table, but Christian Quartz is our regional president. We've been very thoughtful about who we're adding to our leadership team as we expand this network of our North Texas team. And I think if we are being thoughtful and being aware that this is our gap or we have a shortfall and being very intentional with our hiring practices, that number is going to even out and get better. But we have work to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Kim, when you started your career, did you ever imagine you would be in the role that you're in today and in this organization?
Well, I never even imagined I'd be in this career that I'm in today, since I studied a completely different field, and I thought when I was young doing that, I was going to become a diplomat. Actually, that was my goal. So I'm a diplomat in a different way. I don't know how many know how orchestras are structured, but it's a union. It's a national union. So there's a 120-page document that tells us what we can do and not do and what they can do and not do. And so I have to negotiate that contract every 2 or 3 years. I have to negotiate on a national level for media rights for the orchestra for what we can do on digital, on TV, radio, etc. So, and then of course, if you have a whole staff, plus you have 96 union employees who are high-level professionals, that literally it's easier to get into Harvard University than it is to get in the top 10 American orchestras. For every audition, you have literally 1,000 applicants, and it's a behind-the-screen audition, so no one can see who's auditioning, and it's all very quiet and secret, and there's literally only one person in the whole organization who knows who's going on stage. So you can imagine, after all that these people have been through to get their jobs, they are absolutely top level, and they have the egos also of top level people. So it's a little bit akin to like a college professorship, and it's a tenure for life job, and there's no mandatory retirement age. So think about all of this put together, and you would think this could be a little tricky some days, and it is. But I really thought that I would be living in another country right now, doing something, whether it was for the U.S. government or international business, and I ended up falling in love with the puzzle solving of running large orchestras, and it's been very rewarding. And half of my job is going to concerts and to go to receptions and dinners with supporters of people who love the arts. So, I mean, I do work a lot of hours, but half of it is just so much fun. So what could be better than that?
I love that. And I love that you've always aspired to be a leader, and even though it wasn't exactly your first thing that you had envisioned, it's just saying with what Renda was saying is maybe not the career path you thought, but it still turned out that you were a leader and inspiring other people. So tell me a little bit about, I know we talked about women in the other industries, but how are women are women represented in orchestras, in management, and in the C-level, and other orchestras around, and other arts around the country?
So there's been a big sea change in the last 10 years, but prior to that, in the top 20 orchestras in the country, there were only 2 female CEOs, and now there are 8, so that's been a big change, maybe a generational change too. But when I came to Dallas, I was very well aware, having come from the Boston Symphony, which is a pretty paternalistic organization, especially the orchestras that have been around for hundreds of years tend to be more conservative. And so when I was started at the BSO and I was moving my way up the ranks, it was really funny. The guy who was the head of the bars, so he managed all the bars, said, "I'm rooting for you, Kim. I hope someday that you can be the CEO of the BSO." And I said to him at that moment, "I don't think that'll ever happen, but I probably could be a CEO somewhere else." But so that's kind of the gestalt of that. And then when I came to Dallas, I was
Quick question: when you say
Sure.
the bar, is that like the attorney's bar?
No, like the bars where they serve alcohol. Yes, isn't that funny? Of all the people.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry,
No, it's
I
a
was
good
trying
question.
Okay.
So anyway, I came to Dallas, and I was the first female CEO in Dallas, which was very exciting. On the other hand, the Dallas Symphony was a leader in orchestras. There had already been 6 female chairs of the board. If you know the arts district at all in Dallas, a huge amount of the funding came from female philanthropists. We had many arts leaders who are women over the years, including when I arrived, and the orchestra was 50% women already at the time when I arrived. So I felt like this had some really good DNA to make some great strides, and we launched a number of really important women's initiatives, hiring female principal guest conductor, a composer in residence who's a woman, and commissioning 50% of all the new pieces by women, and starting an international symposium, the first ever of its kind, Women in Classical Music, which happens, it's going to be its 5th year this year. So
Wow.
we took advantage of the wind behind our sails on all of that.
That's amazing. Yeah. So another question I have is, and this is me just wanting some personal advice. How do you guys balance career, personal life, and passions? And I'll leave it to anybody that wants to answer.
Go ahead, Kim.
No, I've had 2 questions in a row.
Adriana.
I don't even know if there's such a thing when people say balance and then just, live your personal life out at home when you come to work. I think it's all intermingled, right? I need to have balance, I think, like in 6 areas in my life, or I call it maybe dimensions, to be able to just like live well. And to me, that's first and foremost is God. It's my inner self. And so I get up early in the morning every day. I like to do my little prayer, my little meditation. So wherever I am in the world, that's how I start my day. And also wherever I am, if it's on a Sunday, then I try to look for the closest place where I can do, where I can go and serve the God. it's also about family. So I don't have any children, but I'm a proud aunt of 3. My parents live in Colombia. My brothers live here in the U.S. And so I try to be present at any, milestone event in my family's life. And so wherever I am also in the world, I also mark down my calendar and I fly from wherever I am to be present. And so family and friends are important to me. I mentioned about my career and the work that I do with the community. So to me, that's when I talk about my profession, it's not just career, but it's all of it, right? And so I like to be able to do both. So even whenever I travel, then I also check then, with the organizations that I support, what do they have going on in that particular place, and if I can support any of those events, then I do. For those who know me well, I'm a runner. I like to do triathlons, and so I also like to check whatever activity is going on in that area so that I can, have a run here, or I can participate in one of their local races that is going on so that I can stay active. And obviously, financials are important too, because I'm not just a nonprofit, and so as long as my financials are also in place and everything is checked, and then I'm good. So I think it's all how you balance, right? And sometimes, you can manage when one is not doing so well. But I always try to make sure then all of them are just checking well, and if they are, then I'm good, right?
I mean, similar to that, I don't know that there is a correct way to balance work and life. I think it's an ebb and flow.
Yeah.
And sometimes work is going to get more of your attention and your time, and sometimes it's life and your family.
Yeah.
And it's having a good support system, I think, is really valuable. I have the pleasure of working with a lot of young women who have young children, and I think about them, and I'm like, okay, that 0 to 3, yes, it's an amazing time, and and you're feeling guilty, or you have this mom guilt of not being home when your 4-year-old or 5-year-old comes home. That guilt can shift in different times of your life and as your kids grow. For me, I tell them, hey, that 5 to 10 or whatever is a great time to, pay attention, but also when that child is 13 to 16 is really important to be there and be there for dinner every night, because the voice of influence is so much larger at that time and stage of their life. But in terms of work-life balance, I don't know that it exists in a perfect 50-50 kind of way all the time.
Yeah.
It's very much a rhythm and ebb and flow.
One time I had a leader, this was early in my career, but I remember he said, he was probably talking, again, I was one of the few females in the room, and I was the youngest, so he was probably talking more to the male counterparts. But he did say, there's times where you're working on these complicated projects that are going to take you away from home. But he said, try not to be away from home for more than 3 weeks at a time, because you're going to become irrelevant. Which means, your wife is going to find a way to make things happen at home, right? And then you're really going to become irrelevant. Meaning that maybe the first week is going to be like, he's not here, my God, I'm doing everything by myself and all. But then she's going to find a way. And so that always stick in my mind. It's like, you need to be present somehow. So there's going to be times, but like you said, but hopefully it's not going to become, the common denominator. And so I also think about that in terms of my employees, right? Yes, there's times when projects are going to require that we stay longer, but I just got to make sure that I'm not asking too much of them, because there is that well-being and it's that balance. And if I know that I like to get my work out, and if I know that that things are important for me, maybe that means something else for them, right? Just because I don't have children and I like to work out and this and that doesn't mean that they don't have other priorities, right? So we just have to be flexible. And I think that COVID really showed us that there's ways that we can do the work without being 100% at work all the time. that yes, you can, be at home, or mom, yes, you can go home early, yes, you can do this, and still get the work done, right? And so I think that's also the balance, and is holding people accountable for what they need to do, and be present when you need to be, and if you need to go, then someone else from the team, can pick up the work from you. But it's also the communication, right? It's speak up, so that, and it's the help needed type of culture at work, so that someone else can help you out, and we can all pitch in and get the work done, right, when it's needed.
I appreciate that. I have a 9-month-old, so all the tips for work-life balance is appreciated.
Yeah.
Okay, another question I had, I know we have a lot of men that are here today with us. I wanted to hear from you, Kim. Have you had male allies in your career, and how have they helped you along the way?
Yes, so my mentor when I was at Boston Symphony was my boss, who was the man, who still is a man. He has not changed since then. And he actually really taught me everything about the business, and had he chosen not to do that, I would not be sitting here in this position today, because it's a really complicated business. The artistic side is one whole thing. I'm not a musician, and almost every single person doing my job in this country is a former musician. But also the whole union dynamic, and how to handle those very difficult situations, and the fundraising. Fundraising is about 70% of what we do, and so if you don't have a good mentor to really teach you the way to do that is effective, then you will never truly succeed. And so I appreciated the fact that he really saw the potential in me, knew I was totally committed, and that I would just really want to excel, and he gave me all of the tools to do that, and that was really transformational for me.
That's great. Renda, how about you?
Yeah, I've had many allies in my career over the years, but I'm privileged to work for a man today who really saw the strengths that I had and is leveraging those strengths. And so some of those are, community work, or working with other women, or working with teams. He's definitely been the person that's kind of pulled me out of trying to stick in one particular box. Like, I'm a lender, I'm a commercial banker, this is what I do, and this is all I do. He's like, there's so much more that you can do. But that allyship, if as a man you can provide that to any women in your companies or in your home, and wherever it is in your relationships, it's so important to provide that safe space in which they feel valued, and they're able to excel in different parts of their job that maybe they don't think they have the strengths for, but they have the strengths for. I'd say push them, because it's really been powerful.
Yeah, I love that. And if you guys were at the last Aspire, our speaker Lee, he talked a lot about how you can't change, it's really difficult to change an employee's weaknesses, and so he talked about honing in on their strengths. So I love that your boss does that with you, and that's really effective. Adriana, how can male coworkers help their female colleagues?
Well, so throughout my career, first, I don't think you need to be in a position of management to be an ally and to be a mentor. I learned everything from the technical side, actually from the mechanics on the floor, right? They had been in that position for 30 years. And I'm going to tell you, the very first, I told this to my mentees. I remember the very first day at work when I went to the shop floor. This mechanic told me he had 30 years of experience, and it was a union environment. And so I remember going to the floor, and he told me to go back. He told me to go back to where I came from. And he didn't mean Colombia. He meant to the office with the air conditioning, right? So back in the day, the shop floor didn't even have air conditioning. So think about the summer times in St. Louis, right? So it didn't matter, you're in the cockpit, you're building this aircraft. Think how hot that was. So we, the engineers, we had, even if it was a basement, at least we had air conditioning. So he said, just go back to where you came from, right? So I remember calling my dad, crying, right? And my dad said, Adriana, you're being paid to learn. You know nothing out of college, right? He goes, you know nothing. So go back and tell the mechanic that you're actually there to serve him and to learn from him. So I'm like, okay. So that's what I did. And the relationship, just the whole communication changed. Because I'm like, I'm not here to tell you what to do, because certainly I had no idea what I was doing. First time in my life that I had seen an aircraft. Never built an aircraft before. And so that's what I told him. And I said, in order for me to help you, I need to understand what it is that you do, so that I can put these tools that I learned at school to your service. But first I need to know what it is that we're doing here, because I have no idea. And at that point, I actually gained 20 uncles, 30 grandparents, like 20 bodyguards, and it was awesome. But I had to really gain that trust from them. It was the whole spirit of trust, right? So it's not, I have a college degree, I'm all of this. So it was that. And then a lot of my colleagues today, now that we're talking, diversity and inclusion and all of that, I learned all of that from the mechanics. And yes, it was a male environment, but I learned all of that from you folks, right? And so I'm so grateful. And yes, I had female mentors, the few that were in management. Our very first affinity group, it was Boeing Women in Leadership, because there were just such a few of us. It had nothing to do with, Hispanic and Black and employees, none of that. It was Boeing Women in Leadership. So, but my white male employees today, so they go, okay, Adriana, it's all about this diversity. How can we help? Right? Because now they feel that they're the minorities. I don't even know what to say anymore. Right? So how can I be an ally? And so it's probably listening to the women at the table, and when someone is being inappropriate, or when that female at the table is not being heard, when her idea is not being heard, and when the male counterpart says the same thing that the female just did and no one pay attention to that, then you go, oh yeah, John, it's exactly what Kim just said. So it's awesome that that you're also in agreement with Kim's comment, and something like that, right? So it's reassuring that that the female comment was as good as what you just said. It's also when opportunities become available, that you also have in your succession plan a female or a person of color or a minority in your succession plan, right? And then you're putting those names at the table. And so I always tell my team, I'm going first for capability, for the skill set. So if everything else is equal, and if I have a female or a minority, I'm also going for the minority or the female. Everything else equal. But obviously the skill set and the capability goes first.
Kim, what advice would you give to the next generation of leaders?
Well, I think that the world has changed dramatically over the last few years. COVID is just one piece of it. But I think that we need to think about leadership holistically. So when I was growing up in management, so to speak, it was really just job focused. It wasn't thinking about the whole employee and how do we integrate things that will help employees grow into the regular job. So you didn't have to do all your growth work in your personal time. I think we have to integrate those two things. And realistically, if you don't add that into the workday, so for example, you could add in some professional development component, 30 minutes to every day, or twice a week, 1 hour, and not make it mandatory, but try to encourage as many people to go as possible. And that would allow people to continuously grow and build their skill set and learn new things and all of that. And another thing is sort of something like a yoga, like having a yoga class available at lunch a few days a week. For those who can't figure out how to make exercise time because they have the work-life balance challenges of young kids at home, or like people in our line of work, we're in the entertainment business, so we have something every single night. If it's not a concert, it's a donor event. We have Saturdays and Sundays when we work. So how do you put a balance and downtime into the work schedule formally? And so I think leaders of the young leaders now and leaders of the future really have to think about that, because it's not an extra, it is a mandatory thing for the success of the business and the human being.
Renda, what has been your biggest success in your career?
Oh, wow, that's a big question. In my career, I think, if we're just looking at that specific part of my life, the biggest successes continue to happen. And that is, and I talked to someone else in the room earlier about it, it's about connecting people in a really meaningful way. Whether it's my clients to an organization that I think they're really going to enjoy, or nonprofit. That type of connectivity is probably my favorite part of my job. One example is actually, I'm going to learn more about it tomorrow actually. I made this connection between my client and someone I met on a panel like this that worked in television and sold a television company. And my client was starting to relaunch her television company. And she had mentioned, hey, do you know anyone in this space? And it was kind of a random question, but the timing was perfect. And I was able to connect the two of them. And tomorrow, she's launching this television channel. And it's pretty amazing, right? And I'll learn more about it and share with you guys. But that type of influence or connectivity is really what makes my days really beautiful. And it's what I'm impassioned by.
That's incredible. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Adriana, what about you?
I don't really think it's about me anymore, right? It's probably it's leveraging all these opportunities that I have had, and then being able to open the doors now for like the next generation of leaders. Yeah.
Kim?
I mean, I think that finding the passion, whatever one's passion is, like we have to make a living, right? No matter what. But to find the passion, the thing that really makes your job not feel like a job, is the goal, or should be the goal as much as possible. That's what I have kids who are 27 and 28, and they say, Mom, how can you work so much? How can you why do you like getting up in the morning and going to work? And because it doesn't feel like a job to me.
Yeah.
And if people can find that early on, then it makes all the difference in the world. It's transformative to your own life and to everyone around you. Because if you come in and you're happy every single day, that is so contagious.
I agree. Okay, well, I'm going to open it up to see if anyone in the audience has a question, please. No question?
Yeah.
Adriana, you know that the aerospace and defense industry is dominated by men, and one of your competitors, maybe competimates in the industry back in the 2015 timeframe mandated that the policy in the company would be that 50% of all executives would be women by the year 2020. So I ask, what do you think about that? And do you think that marginalizes women with the skills? And like you said, that the most important thing that you look at when you're hiring people is, do they fit the role? Do they have the skills? Do they have the talent? And then all things being equal, I'm going to hire the woman or the minority. But what do you think about that, mandating a policy to make 50% of the executives a woman when the industry is dominated by men itself?
So diversity, and the studies have shown that diverse companies and organizations are more successful. So it is a fact, right? And I think what the policy is really forcing us is to go and look for that pool of talent. And it's the right thing to do. We were just not doing it before. So the talent is out there. We just have to go look for the talent. The CEO of Boeing Global Services is Stephanie Pope, a female. The CEO of Boeing Defense and Space, who just recently retired, female. So it's there. We just have to grow the female talent and put them in those positions. And unless we have those goals and those stretch goals, and unless they're tied to where people care the most, which is maybe your bonuses or what have you, and we're intentional about it, we're not going to go make it happen. And so I'll give you an example. Boeing wanted to be part of Diversity, Inc., 50 most diverse companies in the US. And in 100 years of existence, we were not part of Diversity, Inc. I remember I was part of the enterprise audit program, and so they selected me to go to corporate in Chicago. And I'm like, what do an engineer with operations and supply has to do with HR, right? Well, a strategy is strategy regardless of the function, right? So you start looking then at how is that you're giving money here, you're giving money there, but then you're not really asking yourself, what am I getting in return? How am I really leveraging my relationship with these organizations that I'm giving money to? And then you look at global industrial champions and what is that they're doing. So look at Northrop Grumman, look at other companies that are part of Diversity, Inc., and what is that they're doing, and how is that they're doing it. So unless you're intentional about it, and you put solid plans in place, you're not going to attain that goal. And that is true for whatever is that we want to attain in life, isn't it? But we have to be intentional. So then you hire the right, then you look at your gaps, and then we go, well, we have to hire someone who was actually in the hotel industry that is looking at this, aerospace differently. And so we hired that person, and then he was able to get us into Diversity, right? It's someone who is going to come and disrupt the way that we're doing business, and he's going to look at it totally different. And then we have to put these plans in place. But the talent is there. The talent is there. I want to give you another example. So 2018, I was nominated and I was inducted into the Hall of Fame for the College of Engineering at the University of Missouri. So huge accolade. First Hispanic, 7th female. So I'm like, wow, nice, right? But then you go, gosh, we've been in existence for 50 years. And then you go, so are you telling me that I'm the first Hispanic? I mean, I'm sure there's other Hispanic or people who claim to be Hispanic that have done a lot in 50 years more than I have, should deserve to be inducted into the Hall of Fame of the College of Engineering at the University of Missouri. And more than 7 female that should be in the Hall of Fame. So I'm not, I'm accept, I'm very grateful for the honor, right? So now that I'm in the Hall of Fame, I'm looking at the bylaws and the nomination process. So the nomination process says that you need to know the person you're nominating. And I go, why? So then you look at the people on the board, and they graduated 30, 40 years before I did. How in the world are they going to know me? I mean, I stick in the U.S., right? But I moved 7 times with the Boeing company. Now I live in Dallas. how in the world, if you graduated 30 years before I did, you don't even have LinkedIn, for God's sakes. I mean, my father doesn't have LinkedIn. How are you going to know me? So this person, right, worked for Boeing. Okay, great. But unless, there was that connection, how are you going to know me? Do I know you when I recruit you to work for Boeing? No, I don't. So there was all these limitations that are not needed, right? So then when you start removing all those roadblocks, then you're opening up yourself. And then they said, well, we can only nominate like 5 people. And I go, but why? Well, because, this is a very selective process. And I go, but how many people are we graduating every year? So why 4? Like, what is 4 the magic number? Why not 10? Right? So we found out, for instance, that the president of Dell in Asia graduated from the University of Missouri. Isn't it that like worth of someone that needs to be in the Hall of Fame? And they go, but the person needs to be present. Don't you think that the president of Dell in Asia can make it to Columbia, Missouri? Well, of course he can. I mean, private jet for that. Right? And so these limitations, and why? So I'm like, I want to change these bylaws because they're really limiting our ability. So then I put some goals, like with percentages for minority, so that, the Hall of Fame, it's more inclusive and represents the people that were graduating every year. So then I go and talk to the dean, and I said, Dean, I want the goals that I'm going to set for the Hall of Fame, I want them to be aligned with the goals that we have in the College of Engineering for minority and female. What are the numbers? And so Dean Noah is looking at me. There's no goals. And then now we're trying to attract more people for the College of Engineering. And I go, Dean, there is a gap. So how are we saying we want to attract more people if we don't even have goals in place? So we're saying we want to, but we don't even have a goal, a measurable goal in place. There's a problem there. So that's why the policy had to be put in place. Because unless you do it that way, we're never going to get there.
Good question. We have time for one more question, and then I think the ladies will stick around if anybody wants to ask them questions after.
So I'm just wondering, do you ever get any pushback from males who are highly aggressive, high achievers, who are saying, hey, I don't think I'm being treated fairly in this environment where we're really pushing to have women? My guess is you would have some of those at least thinking that, if not asking the question. And if they ask the question, how do you address those?
I really think it goes back to measuring everyone's success as that, like their role, how are they successful, and using really concrete measurements. I mean, all of us have goals that we have to achieve, right, in any of our jobs. And it's the same thing when you're comparing yourself or another person, male or female. It's the same measure, right? If they're being successful, they're going to be rewarded. If they're hitting their goals and targets, they're going to be rewarded. That's just the way I think I would look at it, and that's
so
the way.
That's the goal. Do you ever get questioned about it from males?
I mean, I have not experienced that.
Okay, that's why I was curious.
Yeah. I have.
I have, for sure. I mean, the question is, if you're spending all this time devoting, positions and new works and artistic stuff to women, what about the men? And, my reply is usually, well, the men have had it like for the last 100 years, and we're just giving a few years to the women, not exclusively, but giving a little more emphasis to the women to get it to the right place. And most of them accept it, but a few don't. A few are just very not happy about it. But I mean, there's always somebody who's unhappy no matter what, right? Yeah.
And usually the less achievers are the ones who are unhappy.
The what?
Less achievers.
Achievers.
Yeah, the lower achievers.
The lower achievers.
Lower.
Yeah.
One of my mentors once told me, let the data speak for itself.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mentioned that I got promoted before the age of 30. And so my boss at the time, he just told me, Adriana, since you're going to be now evaluating other employees once you become a manager, I'm just going to tell you this, not to put anyone under the bus, but just so that you learn. So I mentioned how I did these 3 rotations, and you have to have courage, really, to say yes to these hard projects, because it wasn't just like I'm moving, packing my bags and then moving to Seattle and here and there in 2 years, right? And so when I came back and I got a promotion, he said, one of my colleagues said this during his performance review. When he found out that I got the promotion, he said, so I guess you have to be a young chick in this organization to get the opportunities and the promotions. And so my boss said, so let me just tell you what the young chick did for the Boeing company in the last year. So she went to Seattle, and these were the results. She went to work for the T-38, and these are the results. And so we're getting a follow-on contract on the T-38. She just came from the Czech Republic. These are the results. What have you done for me lately? So then it's not emotional anymore. It's numbers. So again, it's
So
about
it sounds like
performance.
both of you are saying you gotta have the measurable goals
Yeah.
where you can answer that question.
Right.
Absolutely.
So remove the emotion out of it, right? It's about results.
Well, thank you guys so much. This has been amazing. I love the conversation. I'm sure people have more questions. If you guys want to stay around, they may be here a few more minutes. But we hope to see you guys at our next event. We won't have an event in April. Our next one will be in May, and so we'll be sending out an email blast about that soon. Just a reminder, if you need a CPE certificate, JC can get you that outside. You just need to turn in your eval form. And if you're not on our email blast list, feel free to leave your business card out front, and we'll get you added to that as well. Thank you guys so much.